Recently, the Greater Nashville Technology Council hosted a special forum for NTC members to connect directly with some of 2023's mayoral candidates on issues that matter most to them. My name's Clark Buckner of Relationary Marketing, and I sat down with each candidate to discuss their vision for the future of technology. Here's what they had to say about specific initiatives they plan to implement to achieve their goals if elected.
Well, I do have lots of ideas about this. Two things first, though. One, when you think about it really, what is important about leadership right now is actually setting challenges and thinking through how you're pulling out the ideas, testing what's going to work, and driving those processes to actually get better and solve problems faster over time. And then second, you have to really think through how to embed innovation and technology throughout the organization. So one of the things that I want to think through is how do we actually create a chief innovation technology officer at a senior level in the mayor's administration so that we are fully embedding that brand of thinking, frankly, into the DNA of the city. Because if you think right about the possibilities of technology, you should think about how places in other countries are using artificial intelligence and machine learning to improve solid waste sorting and increase the amount of what's going thrown in the trash that is ultimately recycled. They're thinking about how to use those technologies to improve traffic and transportation infrastructure over time. They're thinking about how you embed technology in virtually everything you do. And you want that to be something that happens at the strategic level. And so I think that that's step number one. Step number two is I think we have to think about economic development a little bit differently. For too long as a city, we've only had like one person who's really the quarterback for economic development. And that means that when you've got a big deal company that's a 500-pound gorilla that you're trying to recruit, that the economic development director is really focused on how do you recruit that one person, when you need a broader economic development approach that's going to think through how are we creating the ecosystem, the workforce development structures, the access to capital, so that this is not just a place where you're recruiting businesses that have already established themselves, but you're recruiting the startups, the founders, the venture funds, the early stage businesses, and setting them up to succeed. And so that means that you need to make this a better city to do business, and that the mayor needs to work collaboratively with industry partners. I usually tell people, if the mayor is the smartest person in the room, it means the mayor needs to invite more people to the room. And so a lot of it is how do you actually bring in industry partners, thought leaders, all the voices around the table, so that you're setting a strategy that's not just going to guide the 4 years of one mayor's economic priorities, but that it's genuinely leading the city's efforts to move the ball down the field on how we can become a technology and innovation capital. And you can actually see in practice that cities have, with mayors that have been forward thinking and have taken this on, have achieved market success. I mean, Austin a decade ago, Miami with Francis Suarez in the last couple of years have really put their shoulders into investing in this space, creating that ecosystem and recruiting companies and trying to build the workforce pipelines that you're going to need to actually get the job done.
Most certainly. I actually want to use the technology community to the documents that our kids use in school, especially our immigrant community, they don't have the documents in their own language. So I would really like for us to insert the technology to be able to transcribe those documents, so it'll make it an easier path and an easier situation for those immigrants to be able to learn, so they don't spend so much time trying to understand, because everything is in English right now and it's difficult. And all of those things impact their esteem. It impacts their ability to learn, to think, because they are not communicating in their original language. They feel somewhat behind. And what we've got to do is restore hope in every last one of them. So if we keep those barriers away, and with technology, we can do that. That's the only way I see us being able to do it timely and efficiently and effectively.
Right. And there's probably a lot of tech-enabled solutions to help streamline that. You know what I'm saying? So
that was the word I was looking for.
Oh, yeah?
Streamline.
Streamline.
Absolutely.
We need government streamlined.
That's right, we do. And one of the things that I plan to do is make sure that our metro departments are accountable and efficiently ran.
We talk about affordable housing, and that's really top of mind to people. One thing I think it's important for us to understand is that it's not just about providing affordable housing, but about lifting up the workforce in our community, because there are so many jobs available that if we can actually get people to where they can afford the housing and not just work on making the affordable housing available, I think that's going to work better for us in the long term, because really, realistically speaking, with the city that has our growth, it's going to be hard to continue to triage the lack of affordable housing. What we need to do is lift up our community. So that's one thing. I also think transit, we're way behind in transit. We're 7th worst in the country for a city our size in transit. As a mayor, multimodal connectivity was a big focus of mine. I got a grant for a multimodal path in the city of Oak Hill down Franklin Pike. I served on the Transit Alliance and the South Corridor Task Force with the Greater Nashville Regional Council. Transit is a regional issue. Most of these tech issues are regional. So we need to look at things like moving Radnor Yards to Wilson County so that we can free up our internal train lines. We need big, bold decisions like that. And then we also need the steady daily work of making sure that we're building the connectivity so people can get to transit. I would also say that, Google Fiber would be an instance of something that, we did wrong. As a mayor in Oak Hill, I worked with Google Fiber. They were going to microtrench our neighborhood. It was an exciting time because, as you know, if we don't have IoT, then we can't possibly move forward with any kind of smart city initiatives. And it was unfortunate to see that the political situation there with the poll wars prevented that from happening. And so I have a real deep understanding of the threats that come from our state government regarding technology development. And that's really more about relationships and communicating opportunity costs and communicating financial opportunity than it is about anything else.
So in each of those focus areas that I talked about, I think there's a lot of innovation that we can utilize in each one. I'll start with public education. So I'm a graduate of Metro Nashville Public Schools, as I mentioned. My wife, Chrissy, and I have 6 kids between us. It's quite a challenge in and of its own self, but each of them has attended Metro Nashville Public Schools. And so we've seen a lot of what the city has to offer. It's important that we continue to invest. So there's a great IT academy at John Overton High School, and where Jill Pittman is the principal. And investing in academies like that to help develop the next generation of IT workforce, I think, is important for the industry. It's also really important for kids, finding ways for them to engage and feel engaged in the public school system. So I'd like to invite companies to get more engaged in the academies, like the IT Academy at Overton High School.
What age is that for?
That's 9 through 12.
So that's high school, learning things that you might not even know about. That's an option of a career.
Exactly. Yeah. And they have some great internship opportunities that are integrated. There's some really great stories about students who have begun internships and then found careers to go straight into work without even going to college in some instances. I think each kid needs to chart their own path. Here,
Nashville Tech Council, Greater Nashville Tech Council, they do a lot of stuff with schools, all grades, not just high school. And it's trying to be that spark to help someone know, hey, there's a whole path here that you might not know about, and it can be generation changing with making sure you get part of the industry that's happening.
Absolutely.
It can change families forever.
It really can. And I think, you sort of hit the nail on the head. Each kid is different, right? There are some kids who are into music. There are some kids who are engaged by science, some kids who love written word or English. It's important to meet each kid where they are and not just where they should be stereotyped to go in. How many people do you know become a lawyer because their dad was a lawyer and then they end up as a lawyer and they're miserable? We need to be meeting kids where they are, creating alternatives for kids. There are some great public schools in Nashville, but every school in Nashville should be a world-class school. Part of the way we do that, I think, is through innovation, including the tech sector.
One of the visions that I have, we have a lot of magnet schools. I would love to have a magnet school just for IT and a magnet school for agriculture. A lot of kids are not going to college. That's just a fact. And one of the many sayings that I have is, I want everyone to do better than Natisha. Don't live through your children, live with your children. I kind of analyzed myself after my children were grown. We want our children to be this, we want our children to be that. So IT, I'd love to see an IT mag school certification, and as they leave, they can go right into the job force instead of having to go get a 4-year degree to say, I'm going to work in an industry of my choice.
What that is a fascinating report because it speaks to, I think, what we all feel, but it actually puts numbers around it in terms of both what is the rate of job growth in tech, which is outpacing the overall rate of job growth in Middle Tennessee. It speaks to what people can be compensated in tech, which is well above the median. So it is definitely not just the future, but it can be Nashville's future, and it is a great future to try and nurture. I think in tech, as in any industry, talent and the growth of the talent and to be able to foster talent, we can't solve our issues in Nashville just by recruiting talent into Nashville. We need to do a better job growing our own talent. And that is really, I think, where the mayor's office can have a major role. That starts with investing not just in public education, but ensuring that in our public schools, we are doing things to encourage people to have an interest in technology, that whether or not that is field trips or bringing people in from the private sector into the schoolroom and into the classroom to talk about what it's like to work in tech and what the opportunities are in tech. That is inviting people, again, in the private sector to do things with our children that get them excited. We should have a robotics program in every school. We should have people who have the ability to teach our kids how to code. This should be fundamental. Just as we talk about reading, writing, and arithmetic, technology is the future. The second thing is we need to really get serious about how do we reskill. We have some start in that regard. Nashville Software School, Pivot Technologies. At Alliance Bernstein, we hired those types of folks. But as a city, again, we need to scale that. There's some really interesting models. For example, I work with Nashville State. They've got a really interesting model with Tractor Supply. There are more of those types of things that we can do to, if you will, grow our
Right.
tech skilled folks.
They're making a dent, but we got a lot more.
We have a lot more to do. I'd say the other thing is, and all of this gets connected, is this is where another example of we're building the right relationship with our state, because we need to get the state more involved in funding some of these initiatives as well.
Well, I think some of the initiatives is to also be able to, as far as transit is concerned, because it's definitely not something that's going to happen tomorrow as soon as I'm sworn in on September 1. It is something that's going to happen with us working on it bit by bit. It's called eating a big gorilla one bite at a time. When we're talking about transit, let's just start with the low-hanging fruit, how technology can help us, letting us know that intersections that need to be freely flowed, and letting us know about when a traffic light is out that has caused an accident, or to keep the accident from happening because it's blinking after a storm. Letting us know that street lights are out, because right now I have to call NES and say street light number 18346 is out, and we need that light on because we want safety in our neighborhood. We need lighting. All that comes from technology. So I can see us making sure that we incorporate those technologies into our city to make us more safe and make us more effective and efficient.
So imagine if your library card was also your bus fare, could let you check out a bike share bicycle, and was also your student ID, right? So you start middle school and suddenly you've got an ID or whatever, and you can sign up to ride the bus. There are so many things that unify the interaction with Metro, and I think that's a great example. Starting to transition that to people's phone or other smart devices to have an access point. And again, I'm not inventing a lot of this, but it's things that we've seen other cities do. We are trying to anticipate a future where Charlotte and MLK become a smart corridor in the city to take advantage of better signalization, right? We are woefully behind some of our peer cities in terms of thinking about a network of traffic management so that you don't pull up to one red light and it's red, and then you get to the next one and it's red, and instead traffic flows based on where people are actually in their cars, or responds to major pedestrian events like a Predators game when thousands of people are suddenly going to be crossing the street as pedestrians at one time, and how you adjust to that. It turns out people in the software industry think about the flow of data and network traffic and all those kinds of things all the time. And if we take some of those principles and apply them to the way a city is supposed to work, you get much better outcomes.
Right. It almost sounds like what you're describing is like a CTO, CEO, right? And what other ideas are you thinking?
So the city should have that, and we've been there before in some ways. And I know we have a director of ITS, but I really think in some ways this is now looking also about the power of data, the power of networks. And I ultimately want a Nashville that can actually implement some of its own software or start to use what we've seen around the industry, APIs. We have a very underutilized open data portal that lets civic hacking happen. I mean, right here in this building, this is now going back years ago.
That's right. I remember being here for that.
Those kinds of things produce really interesting ways for people to experience the city, especially now that so many residents have smartphones and other smart devices. We can do that user friendliness in some really interesting ways.
Thanks for watching. This episode has been a production of Relationary Marketing in partnership with the Greater Nashville Technology Council.